TLDR Act require specifically here of websites and mobile apps? What are we looking at?
Yeah. Now, first, let me say we like to call it, instead of the name you gave it, too long didn't read. Because it turns out, as you say, most people press agree without knowing what they've agreed to. So what this is about is making the terms of service actually useful. About, if you will, the online transparency, ensuring the consumer is informed. So we would require commercial websites and mobile apps to create a readable summary of their terms of service agreement with an easy to understand, this is how your data is going to be used. We exempt small businesses, so there's not going to be a cost of compliance that folks can't kind of comply with, but we empower the FTC and the state attorney generals to hold those companies accountable that do not comply.
So you say a readable summary. We're talking about an infographic. We're talking about bullet points. What can you sort of force the hand of these companies to do to make sure this important information, and it is so important, is actually getting to the eyes of users in a digestible way?
I actually use, we don't prescribe that, but I'm using a website now that is coming out of Germany. And they obviously have a law which is more restrictive than what we have in the U.S. And if I want to click on their terms of agreement, what the cookies are used for, it tells me these are my mandatory cookies, these are the functional, and if I click, it then tells me, this set of cookies is basically getting my data to all the third parties who might want to use it. It's really a very functional cookie system. Now it can be like the data we collect, it can be what we use the data for, and you can opt in or opt out of a particular subset of what they hope to use it for. Now they're a little tricky because it's easy to press accept all, but you got to hunt for the ones that says accept my selection. But I can find it, and that is a way that I know what I'm agreeing to.
In this whole process, you become a more informed user of that product, which I know is what you, and by the way, this is bipartisan. You do have several Democrats signed on to this as well. This is not just you here. So you mentioned small businesses would be exempted. Talk to me about the companies, the big names who would not be exempted. Who are you really targeting here, Senator?
Well, think of your tech giants. But those who have, I think the threshold off the top of my head is about $100 million in business. So, when we say small companies, we don't mean that small. But we still mean the tech giants, the ones that are really harvesting our data, the Googles, the Facebooks, companies like that, and that then take our data without us realizing it and use it, frankly, sell either the use of it or actually in some cases sell the data itself. And that's what we're trying to limit. If I want to do it, okay. But if I don't want to do it, then you don't have access to my data.
Senator Cassidy, a study found last year the industries with the longest terms and conditions are dating apps, number one, fashion websites, social networking companies, you talked about a few of those, and then finally job sites. Do you feel as if users of those platforms, those apps, those websites were better informed about how their data was being used, that perhaps they might think twice or be a bit more cautious or even skeptical about using those specific products, or at least the ways with which they engage in those sites?
I was once told by an employer that if he wished, a headhunter would give him information gleaned from social media sites about the person's disease state, about things that they might anticipate. For example, are they doing searches for artificial insemination and all that might mean in terms of the company's future healthcare cost? That they search on diabetes, so therefore we think they might be a diabetic. Those things that, frankly, your employer, would have to pay for if you join their work service, but it's really not their right to know it. The fact that you've put it on social media means that it can be gleaned by a headhunter and given to a prospective employer. If folks knew things like that, I think they'd be more hesitant to share their data.
Yeah, these are certainly tricky conversations, and they certainly strike to the heart of the Bill of Rights when you really get down to it. How would this be enforceable by the FTC? And talk to me a bit more about the role that you envision here of state attorneys general as well.
Yeah, attorney generals are the ones who really have brought a lot of these actions. And the FTC, sometimes people have alleged, not saying it's true, they've been a little asleep at the wheel. we think giving the attorney generals the right to bring actions against these companies is more empowering and more likely to affect change than if we rely completely on the federal government. Believe me, I'd rather have the state looking after their interest of the people in that state than relying upon the federal government to do the same.
I'm going to ask this question. No, you and I both know the way that lobbying on the Hill works. Have you had the lobbyists over at Facebook or Meta or the Googles yet knocking on your door and the door of Representative Lori Trahan and Democrats and Republicans alike in support of this thing? I'd have to imagine, Senator Cassidy, this is not the sort of stuff these companies want to hear that someone in your position is trying to prioritize. Have they given you a hard time yet?
It's interesting because Facebook Facebook recently had a guy, one of those ads that pops up. And he was saying how he thinks it's better that the federal government would regulate what is done with X, Y, and Z on the internet. I think it was in terms of speech, than what is done, then it'll rely upon the company to do it. I'd like to think that if you could even the playing field, that people would recognize the abuses that are taking place with people's privacy, and they would think that they could adapt to the new rules of the game. The cynic would say they've got a very profitable business model, and they don't want it to change. But I don't think you want to be on the wrong side of privacy right now with the American people. So I hope it's the former. They just want an even playing field than it is the latter. Don't disrupt the gravy train.
Senator, I'm rapidly out of time. What are next steps here?
Yeah, so we'll continue to build those who are supporting it from both parties and both chambers, and look for just a process. We look for a chance to enter the bill, which would probably be attached to another bill. But part of it is what we're doing here, letting folks know it's an issue, that the bill's filed, and asking those who might be interested in supporting to contact their senator or their representative and ask them to get on.
Senator Bill Cassidy of the great state of Louisiana, thank you, sir. Nice to have you on the show tonight.
Thanks, JD.
Coming up on the show this month, Americans are turning away from booze. We'll discuss why and how alcohol companies are responding to the growing